Shalom, I'm Brother Rael from Reyahnited Soul, and in this video I'll be discussing King David, the standard bearer for the men of Yahudah. I will highlight the accomplishments of David as well as the reverence he showed towards the Most High. So let us nourish our soul with scripture that we may reunite with the Most High, the Elohim of Israel. Now let's get right into it. What do we really know about David, the warrior king? We know that he took Goliath's head and became the greatest king of Israel. Although David was not a perfect man, he was deemed worthy to be the standard bearer for the men of Yahudah, according to Zechariah chapter 12, verse 8, and I read, "In that day shall the Lord defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and he that is feeble among them at that day shall be as David, and the house of David shall be as God, as the angels of the Lord before them." David became a great warrior because he never lost sight of the source of his power, which is the Most High. As a youth, he volunteered to fight Goliath when no man would dare, and took Goliath's head for defying the Most High's army. David became a great king because he never lost his reverence he had for the Most High. During David's reign as king, the people saw no corruption of idolatry. However, the kings after him led the Most High's people into idolatry many times over and corrupted the land. When Yisrael's first king, Saul, from the tribe of Benjamin, didn't work out, the Most High chose David from the tribe of Yahudah, a man after his own heart, according to 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse 14, and I read, "But now thy kingdom shall not continue. The Lord hath sought him a man after his own heart, and the Lord hath commanded him to be captain over his people, because thou hast not kept that which the Lord commanded thee." David secured the throne where the Most High established that all the kings of Israel would come from the tribe of Yahudah, and there will be no end to the throne of David. The tribe of Yahudah is preserved, although scattered and serving in captivity to this very day, while the other tribes have been removed, according to 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 18, and I read, "Therefore the Lord was very angry with Israel, and removed them out of his sight. There was none left but the tribe of Judah only." So, let's delve into the scriptures to look at David, an honorable warrior, a great king, and the standard bearer for the men of Yahudah. There are two things that will get you on the wrong side of the Most High very fast. That is worshiping other gods and disobeying his commands in battle. David did neither. King Saul, however, sealed his fate when the Most High sent him to utterly destroy the Amalekites, to leave nothing alive, including animals. Well, King Saul took it upon himself to spare Agag, king of the Amalekites, along with the best of his sheep, oxen, lambs, and all that was good. That angered the Most High, and Saul never recovered from that decision as his rulership took a nosedive, making way for David. You don't need military experience to know that there are heavy penalties for disobeying orders, especially during times of war. The Most High is very thorough when it comes to war. He leaves nothing behind that will become a snare to his people in the future. You see, we have forgotten the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the one and only living God, a God who utterly destroys his enemies, a man of war, according to Exodus chapter 15, verse 3, and I read, "The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name." The Most High is a man of war. That's why David, an honorable warrior, is a man after his own heart. David always inquired of the Most High before going into battle. He inquired and always did what the Most High instructed him to do. The men of Yahudah shall be as David. Our people have embraced the New Testament doctrine given to our ancestors after slavery, a doctrine with the promise of paradise after death. Given our ancestors' terrible situation, how many of them passively surrendered their lives to their oppressors, desiring death and paradise instead of fighting like the great warriors that they were. I do not downplay the fact that many of our ancestors fought courageously for their lives. Over the generations, however, the New Testament doctrine has turned our men from warriors into sheep without a shepherd. According to the Tanakh, or as some call the Old Testament, the Most High established David as our shepherd, according to Ezekiel chapter 34, verses 23 through 24, and I read, "And I will set up one shepherd over them, and he shall feed them, even my servant David. He shall feed them, and he shall be their shepherd. And I, the Lord, will be their God, and my servant David, a prince among them. I, the Lord, have spoken it." If the Most High spoke it, who has the authority to change it? Let's be very clear. The New Testament doctrine states that we have a different shepherd other than David. By what authority? The Most High was very clear in saying that David shall be their shepherd. If the Most High wanted to replace David, he would be just as clear, giving the name of that replacement, leaving no gray areas for man's interpretation. The Most High doesn't change, according to Malachi chapter 3, verse 6, and I read, "For I, the Lord, do not change. Therefore you, O sons of Jacob, are not consumed." The Most High is wakening his people to the truth. It's time that we err on the side of caution when it comes to anything contrary to the word of the Most High. So whose word will you believe? The Most High or man's? But I digress. Now, getting back to David, the standard bearer of the men of Yahudah, the Most High sent Samuel to the house of Jesse to anoint Yazrael's next king, and there he found David tending the sheep. Seems appropriate since David will become shepherd over the Most High's people. So Samuel anointed David with oil, and the Spirit of the Most High came upon him. According to 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 13, and I read, "Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brethren, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. So Samuel rose up and went to Ramah." With the Spirit of the Most High upon David, let's see what he's able to accomplish. When the Spirit of the Most High departed King Saul, an evil spirit from the Most High troubled him. This caused King Saul to seek out a musician that could play music to soothe him, which brought David into his presence, according to 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 18, and I read, "Then answered one of the servants and said, Behold, I have seen a son of Jesse, the Bethlehemite, that he is cunning and plain and a mighty valiant man, and a man of war, and prudent in matters, and a comely person, and the Lord is with him." Now take note that David is described as a man of war like the Most High. So David found favor with King Saul. And there came a time when Saul was locked in battle with the Philistines as Goliath defied the army of Yazrael for 40 days. When David arrived, bringing food to his brothers, he heard Goliath's words and moved him to do what no other man was willing to do: take on Goliath, according to 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 26, and I read, "And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God?" David convinced King Saul he was ready, since he had already slew a lion and a bear as he protected his father's sheep. So King Saul gave his armor to David to do battle with Goliath, according to 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 38 through 40. And I read, "And Saul armed David with his armor, and he put a helmet of brass upon his head. Also he armed him with a coat of mail. And David girded his sword upon his armor, and he essayed to go, for he did not prove it. And David said unto Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off him. And he took his staff in his hand, and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook, and put them in a shepherd's bag, which he had, even a scrip, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. Now let me emphasize in verse 39 that David did not prove the armor they had given him, meaning David didn't use armor when he protected the sheep and slew the bear and the lion. He wanted to use what he knew worked for him in battle, which was his staff and sling. There is no substitute when it comes to experience in battle. A battle-hardened warrior prefers the weapon he knows that will see him through. And David stuck to his guns, so to speak, the staff and the sling. Nevertheless, Goliath was insulted that they would send out a boy to challenge him, and he cursed David by his gods. David did not respond with insults. Knowing he served the Most High, David responded appropriately according to 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 45. And I read, Then David said to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. Take note that David didn't trade insults with Goliath, or feel the need to defend the Most High with his words. But out of reverence for the Most High, he engaged this uncircumcised Philistine in battle. David ran to Goliath and not only defeated him, but took Goliath's head with his own sword. That was the man of war in David. So why did he have to go there, chopping off Goliath's head like that? Understand, there's a code of honor among honorable warriors. If you challenge an honorable warrior in an insulting manner by running your mouth, do not expect to receive an honorable death if you lose. Getting in your feelings, running your mouth, and hurling insults is not honorable and will cause your head to be detached from its body in battle. Remember, my brothers, all males of Yisrael are warriors, and the men of Yahudah shall be as David. So let's take note in the manner of how David handled his business. Now, after the battle of the Philistines, David and Saul's relations began deteriorating according to 1 Samuel chapter 18, verses 6 through 9, and I read, And it came to pass as they came, when David returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, that the women came out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet Saul with tabrets, with joy, and with instruments of music. And the women answered one another as they played, and said, Saul hath slain thousands, and David his 10,000s. And Saul was very wroth, and the saying displeased him. And he said, They have ascribed unto David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed but thousands. What can he have more but the kingdom? And Saul eyed David from that day and forward. David remained humble and honorable to King Saul. He behaved himself wisely in all his ways, and all of Israel and Judah loved him. Saul offered his daughter for David to wed, thinking it would be a snare unto him according to 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 21. In Saul's mind, this would make David a more valuable target as the king's son-in-law to the Philistines. Then he required of David, for the hand of his daughter, 100 Philistine foreskins, hoping this would cause David to fall in battle. David accepted the king's offer. He and his men went out and returned to King Saul with 200 Philistine foreskins. He doubled that what the king required, because David was a man of war. And King Saul and David's relation grew worse, according to 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 29, and I read, And Saul was yet the more afraid of David, and Saul became David's enemy continually. It's important to know how treacherous King Saul acted towards David as he sought to harm him, even to the point where David became knowledgeable of Saul's plan. David remained an honorable warrior according to 1 Samuel chapter 19, verse 8, and I read, And there was war again, and David went out and fought with the Philistines, and slew them with a great slaughter, and they fled from him. King Saul sought after David's life till he had to flee from his own home. While in exile, 400 men followed David, and he became their captain, according to 1 Samuel chapter 22, verse 2, and I read, and every one that was in distress, and every one that was in debt, and every one that was discontented, gathered themselves unto him, and he became a captain over them. And there were with him about 400 men. Although running for his life, David still carried himself as a leader of men. His situation didn't change who he was. Saul pursued David until he reached Nob, where Ahimelech, the priest, had contact with David. Unaware of David's situation, the priest gave David bread to eat and Goliath's sword. When Saul heard of this, he accused the priest of aiding David according to 1 Samuel chapter 22, verse 13 and 14, and I read, And Saul said unto him, Why have you conspired against me, thou and the son of Jesse, in that thou hast given him bread and a sword, and hast inquired of God for him, that he should rise against me, to lie in wait at this day? Then Ahimelech answered the king and said, And who was so faithful among all thy servants as David, which is the king's son-in-law, and goeth at thy bidding, and is honorable in thine house? Needless to say, Saul ordered his footmen to slay the priest, but they would not harm the priest of the Most High. Luckily for Saul, he had an Edomite in his service that had no problem, according to 1 Samuel chapter 22, verse 18, and I read, And the king said to Doeg, Turn thou and fall upon the priest. And Doeg the Edomite turned, and he fell upon the priest, and slew on that day 75 persons that did wear a linen ephod. Okay, we know that Saul was troubled with an evil spirit, but what about that Edomite? Saul's footmen risked the penalty of death refusing to follow the king's order. However, that Edomite obeyed the evil spirit, jumped right on in there and killed. Coincidence or food for thought? Abiathar, the son of Ahimelech, the priest, escaped and fled to inform David what happened. Now take note that David knew not to trust Edomites back then, according to 1 Samuel chapter 22, verse 22, and I read, And David said unto Abiathar, I knew at that day, when Doeg the Edomite was there, that he would surely tell Saul, I have occasioned the death of all the persons of thy father's house. Those priests were killed because Doeg the Edomite informed Saul. Like current day Edomites who will call 911 on innocent black people doing nothing wrong, hoping the police will rush to judgment and harass or kill them. They've been doing this for thousands of years. Nothing new under the sun. We're just catching them on camera now. Even while on the run, David heard that one of their cities were being attacked by the Philistines. David inquired to the Most High whether he should go and smite the Philistines, and he received the go-ahead. I admire that about David. He's not going into battle without the Most High. A humble and honorable warrior. So David went into battle with those 400 men who followed him, according to 1 Samuel chapter 23, verse 5. And I read, So David and his men went to Keilah and fought with the Philistines, and brought away their cattle and smote them with a great slaughter. So David saved the inhabitants of Keilah. In the meantime, Saul, running around like a madman, fixated on destroying David, while still at war with the Philistines. Does this sound familiar? America is so fixated on destroying the men of Yahudah who are not a threat, while America's enemies grow stronger around them. And we're fighting wars for America too, so yeah. David's situation with Saul sounds very familiar to our situation. There's nothing new under the sun. So Saul pursued David in hopes of trapping him in the city he just saved from the hands of the Philistines, but David left with about 600 men before Saul arrived. I'm really starting to wonder about Saul. The Bible says that he is from the tribe of Benjamin, but he's got some serious Edomite tendencies going on here. Saul continued pursuing David into the wilderness. He was on one side of the mountain, David was on the other. But the Philistines launched another attack, which interrupted Saul's pursuit of David. And after dealing with the Philistines, Saul caught back up to David, who was held up in a cave. David's men at this time felt that the Most High had delivered Saul into their hand, that they may kill him. David drew near Saul and cut off the skirt of his robe, but did no harm to Saul, according to 1 Samuel chapter 24, verses 4 through 6. And I read, And the men of David said unto him, Behold, the day of which the Lord said unto thee, Behold, I will deliver thine enemy into thine hand, that thou mayest do to him as it shall seem good unto thee. Then David arose and cut off the skirt of Saul's robe privily. And it came to pass afterward that David's heart smote him, because he had cut off Saul's skirt. And he said unto his men, The Lord forbid that I should do this thing unto my master, the Lord's anointed, to stretch forth my hand against him, seeing he is the anointed of the Lord. The men of Yahudah shall be as David. Take note at this honorable warrior. You see, in the military, you may have a superior officer that you can't stand, but an honorable soldier respects the authority of the rank, not necessarily the person. A politician, for example, you respect the authority of the title or office, not necessarily the person. However, this does take a certain level of maturity to render honor where honor is due. Now, David honored the fact that Saul was an anointed king of Israel. And when David confronted him with the cut skirt in his hand, Saul knew that David spared his life and came to himself, according to 1 Samuel chapter 24, verse 17. And I read, And he said to David, Thou art more righteous than I, for thou hast rewarded me good, whereas I have rewarded thee evil. Needless to say, King Saul made another attempt at David's life as he pursued him into the wilderness. David came close to Saul once again, taking his spear this time and sparing his life. David knew that he had to keep a safe distance from Saul, lest he would be forced to kill the anointed king of Israel. So he took his 600 men and dwelt in Ziklag at the approval of Achish, king of Gath. David dwelled in the land of the Philistines for 1 year and 4 months, according to 1 Samuel chapter 27, verses 5 through 7, and I read, And David said unto Achish, If I have found grace in thine eyes, let them give me a place in some town in the country, that I may dwell there. For why should thy servant dwell in the royal city with thee? Then Achish gave him Ziklag that day, wherefore Ziklag pertaineth unto the kings of Judah unto this day. And the time that David dwelt in the country of the Philistines was a full year and 4 months. While in Ziklag, David and his men fought the Geshurites and the Gezerites and the Amalekites. When the Philistines marched against King Saul, and David marched with them as a loyal warrior to King Achish. However, David did return to Ziklag at the request of the Philistine princes that did not trust David to fight his own people, although the king did trust him. So David returned to Ziklag to find it on fire, with the women and children taken captive by the Amalekites. David came home and everything was gone. Now, what do you think David did? A. Hold a prayer vigil to honor the victims. B. Conduct a march to protest the Amalekites. C. Run to King Achish for help. Or D. Consult the Most High. David consulted the Most High as to what action he should take. The men of Yahudah shall be as David. Now take note how David doesn't get caught up in his feelings, or lend his ear to unwise counsel, or act out in foolish anger, but instead always consulted the Most High for direction. David understood where his ability to win battles came from, and of course, the Most High said, pursue them, according to 1 Samuel chapter 30, verse 8, and I read, And David inquired at the Lord, saying, Shall I pursue after this troop? Shall I overtake them? And he answered him, Pursue, for thou shalt surely overtake them, and without fail recover all. You can't go wrong when obeying the Most High's instructions. So David and 400 of his men overtook the Amalekites and recovered all the women and children plus the spoil. Meanwhile, the disobedient King Saul was having a heck of a time with the Philistine attack, which Saul ended up losing that battle along with 3 of his sons. Saul took his own life by falling on his sword. However, the Philistines still beheaded his corpse to dishonor his death. Unfortunately for Saul, Jonathan, who loved David as his own soul, was killed in that battle. David always inquired to the Most High and entrusted his instruction. Although Saul was a hot mess, David never lowered himself to insult or harm his king. David had every right to be angered, but kept his distance, stayed alert, and let the Most High handle Saul, which didn't require David's sword. Likewise, my brothers, keep your distance from those who are unreasonable. Stay alert, keep your focus on the Most High, and let him handle his people who transgresses against him. It may not require your sword. The men of Yahudah shall be as David. Okay, this is the end of part 1 of Men of Yahudah shall be as David. The Most High willing, I will upload part 2 in a few days. As always, keep your trust in the Most High. Love him with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. See to it that your household is in line with the word of the Most High as best you can. And with that, I say to you, Shalom.